Good evening, friends. I deem it a honor and privilege to be amongst you this evening in the 52nd Indian Values Congress. I would like to thank Mr. Vinay Goyal for having invited me to this Congress. The first time I have been participating in a number of conferences conducted by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, being the former president of the Institute. I have had the occasion of, participating in many events around the country. And when Mr. Vinay requested me to join all of you here, I readily accepted the invitation. Thank you, Mr. Vinay. The moderator for this session has already set the ball rolling for the topic, Mr. Nitin Lile, who has come from Pune. Friends, the topic that has been assigned to me is startup valuation. I think all of us are in Bangalore. I have heard that a lot of delegates have come across the country to this beautiful city, Bangalore, which is the hub for startups. And my topic would be as to how difficult it is for each one of you if you are valuing a startup. What exactly are the challenges and what are the concerns is something which I thought I would share my insights with all the delegates present here. Friends, India is the most popular destination for startups. And today, India is ranked as the third largest startup hub in the entire world. And if you look at the Ministry of Commerce website, more than 50,000 startups have registered. But if you ask me, frankly, I'm a practicing chartered accountant, I think we have more than 4 to 5 lakh startups in the country which have not been registered, but they are in, carrying out business. The reason why we find that there are a lot of startups in India is because India as an economy is growing fast. The purchasing power of the people have increased. And we find that the political will of the government, a lot of government initiatives are being given for startups. And as a result of which, in a city like Bangalore, we have seen a lot of successful startups thanks to the technology that they are driving. Today, housewives are able to order a taxi or an auto using their apps, Ola or Uber app. You can order food online, Zomato and Swiggy. All of us have seen how it revolutionized the way, food was delivered to the doorstep. And the government has been extremely proactive. A lot of incentives have been given. And then in the guise of ease of doing business, the government said we will also fund startups. And today, the Startup India Seed Fund is having about 945 crores. So what I would like to say is that we have a vibrant startup ecosystem in the country. So where do you figure? All of you sitting here as valuation professionals, what exactly is the role you can play in the startup ecosystem? Because the startup ecosystem is huge. We have a lot of startups in the country. And whichever location you're coming from, I'm sure you'll have a lot of startups approaching you for valuation. Friends, the pandemic definitely gave a push to digitization. And as Mr. Nitin rightly said, the education sector, we had a lot of apps coming in, like, for example, Byju's, then delivery apps like Dunzo, PhonePe, and, I was the director of Indian Overseas Bank. We tried to give a push to digital payments, PhonePe, Paytm, all became very popular. So as a result of which, we found that e-commerce in the country rapidly growing. More than $100 billion is what is estimated as e-commerce transactions. And as a result of which, the Indian startups became extremely successful. And we also have seen the stories recently how Paytm was undervalued. And the role of a valuation professional was put to public scrutiny. One thing we need to keep in mind is that as long as the startups remain within the investors, within the promoters, valuation might not be challenged. But once a startup goes public, and when you have investors across the country investing in the startups, that is when the valuation done by the valuation professional would be challenged, would be subjected to public scrutiny, and that is where I think as valuation professionals, you have to play a very important role. Friends, today we find a lot of companies having huge accumulated losses, hardly any revenue, absolutely no assets. When you're asked to value a company, a traditional company, you have land and buildings, you have plant and machinery, but you have brands, you have intellectual properties. But when it comes to startups, there's absolutely no land and building, there's no machinery. So it becomes very, very difficult, very tricky for you to value. Because we find that, when you are asked to value a startup, you find that you have limited knowledge of the business. Basically, all the startups are technology driven. You have very limited knowledge of the business. You don't have prior knowledge of other companies in the same space. Then we find that the negligible revenues. So how do you build a revenue model? Then huge operating losses. All of us have seen the prospectus of many of the startups which went public recently. Huge operating losses. And promoters have invested very little amount of money. And what is very important for you to keep in mind is that if you are asked to do a valuation of a startup, you need to see the background of the promoters. You need to examine the business model. You need to examine the revenue model, challenge them, try to ask them whether they have been over-ambitious in projecting their revenues. And only then you will be able to sort of, value the enterprise properly. So what is very important is a lot of challenges and lot of risks for valuers when valuing a startup. Friends, today what is happening is that valuation is required by the VC firm. Venture capital funds would like to invest in startups, so they require a valuation report. Then the promoter himself wants to unlock his equity, he wants a valuation report. A promoter wants to go to an IPO, yes, the investment banker wants a valuation to be done. A lot of corporates are looking at merging their company with some other company. They want to acquire companies. That is when a valuation report is required. So the startups have a lot of requirement of proper valuation, and your role becomes very important. Friends, when it comes to whether a valuation would be subject to public scrutiny, yes, in the years to come, valuation would be subjected to public scrutiny. Each and every valuation transaction would be examined. And today we have so many unicorns. More than 20 unicorns have come up in the last quarter itself. And companies have been giving deep discounts. They've been giving cashback offers. They're giving freebies. So it is absolutely essential for you to understand whether the revenues, what they have projected, is achievable. Whatever revenue model that has been built up by the company is achievable. And we have seen a lot of stories like brands have been valued. Kingfisher Airlines, I think all of you are aware, the brand of Kingfisher was valued at 4,100 crores, and all of us have seen the value of Kingfisher today. So brand valuation is also become very, very tricky today. And way forward, SEBI has very clearly stated that they would not get into valuation. It is a duty of a valuation professional to give the value of a company. And what would happen is, way forward, there will be some regulation from the government to see that investors don't lose money, because the IPO frenzy, what we have seen, because of very astronomical valuations, has put a lot of investors at loss. Many investors have lost their money. And SEBI has relaxed a lot of conditions today. The holding period of pre-listed equity, pre-issued equity capital has been reduced. Discretionary allotment to eligible investors has been made. So all this has created a lot of concern, and I'm sure way forward we would see some sort of regulation that is coming in. That is the thinking of the government. So what I would like to conclude is to say that yes, India needs a vibrant ecosystem, and today the startups are providing a lot of gainful employment, and it is absolutely essential for investors. Let us say if I'm an investor in a startup company, definitely I would give credence to the valuation of the company. I should be cautious. I should be careful. I should decide whether I should make the investment. I should not treat it as a lottery, not just be interested in the listing gains. But finally, I think each one of you sitting here in this hall as valuation professionals can play a very important role. Today, if a startup comes to you and they want you to value their company, when you get into their business, try to understand the risks involved in their business, try to understand the projected revenues. You should be able to give the right kind of valuation, because as I said, once you give the valuation, many people would trust your valuation, whether it's investors, whether it's regulators, whether it's promoters, whoever it is would trust your valuation, and there's a very important role to play. So the dynamics of valuation in the startup space is very high, and I'm sure things would settle down, and we'll have a lot of valuation standards that have come in that will help you, guide you to come out with the right valuation, so that is accepted by every investor who is investing in that particular company. Friends, these are some of my thoughts which I thought I should share on startup valuation. Yes, our profession also as a chartered accountant, I could say, play a very important role in supporting the right kind of information that is required for a valuation, but primarily it is your responsibility to see that the value that you arrive at, the enterprise value you arrive for these startups is something that can be, challenged or you can justify. And I'm sure each one of us will be able to live up to the expectations of the regulators, the investors, and all the stakeholders in the startup ecosystem. Thank you very much.